P 8.3. Presented below is an aging schedule for Sycamore AG. At December 31st, 2020, the adjusted balance in allowance for doubtful accounts is a credit of 12,000 euros. Instructions, letter A. Journalize and post the adjusting entry for bad debts at December 31st, 2020. Well, every time you guys see this adjusting entry for bad debts, that means that you're gonna have to make an allowance for doubtful accounts, T account, because otherwise you cannot find these bad debts and you cannot make the adjusting entry. So here I'm making a T account, and I like to put the signs here. So allowance for doubtful account, the increases happen on the credit side, so that's why here is a plus, and the decreases happen on the debit side, that's why here it is a minus. And then what do we have here? Here they say that the unadjusted balance in allowance for doubtful accounts, it's a credit of 12,000. That means that right in the beginning balance is a credit of 12,000. That's why we put the 12,000 here. And why do they present this aging schedule for us? What we really need to know is just this part over here. This is the total estimated bad debts. This amount is what we are going to be putting either here or here at the bottom. Since this amount is positive, we're going to put it here, right? So it is 28,610. The bad debts, the adjust entry that we need to make in order to find the bad debts, it's just how much we have to add either here or here in order for this number to become this number. In this case, both of the numbers are positive, right? So my amount is going to be here. I like to call it X. And what we're going to do is just we're going to use some algebra to find it. So since this 12,000 is on the plus column, it is positive. So it's going to be 12,000 plus X equals 38,610, and then we're just going to subtract this 38,610 minus 12,000, and this amount of 26,610, it is our bad debt expense. The original exercise asked us to journalize it, right? So here, so here we're gonna have the entry. Did they tell us any date? Or December 31st, 2020, right? Okay, so it's going to be December 31st of 2020. We are going to have what? We are going to have bad debt expense, and we are going to have allowance for doubtful accounts at the bottom. Remember to write the full name, okay? Don't write it like me. Okay, so here we're gonna have the amount. And and here just a little bit explanation of why the entry looks like this. Well, bad debt expense, it is an expense account, which means that the signs are plus and minus, right? In the debit position, it is a plus. So in this case, my bad debt expense is going up, right? Because I am recognizing that I have this expense. The allowance for doubtful accounts, on the other hand, it is a minus and a plus. In the credit position, it is a plus. The logic here is that since I recognize that I'm going to have to spend money with this bad debt, I have to increase my allowance because I know that I'm going to be having this bad debt in the future. So my allowance has to go up, and that's why the position is like this. B. Journalize and post to the allowance account the following events and transactions in the year 2021. Here we're gonna have some entries. If you see yourself facing an exercise like this, I really recommend you to first journalize these before putting them into the allowance account, because otherwise it's very likely that you're going to get lost. So let's just journalize the entries first. The first one, it was on March 31st, 1,000 customer balance originating in 2020 is judged uncollectible. Well, when something is judged uncollectible, the entry that we make, what is the date? March 31st, right? The entry that we make is this one over here. We are going to have allowance for doubtful accounts at the top as a debit, and we're going to decrease accounts receivable. This entry, we call it the write-off entry. It's pretty much like we're recognizing that this person here, you see, is judged uncollectible. So I judge this account as I'm not going to receive this money anymore. So you're writing off this as uncollectible. So over here, allowance for doubtful account, just like I mentioned, is a minus and a plus. So here we are deducting, we're taking this money away from our allowance because we're not gonna receive this money anymore, right? So I have to use my own allowance to cover up. That's why it is a minus. And accounts receivable is a plus and a minus. So in this case, I'm also deducting my accounts receivable because I don't have this amount to be receivable anymore. And what is the value? It is 1,000 euros. Okay, what about the second entry? What does it say? On May 31st, a check for 1,000 is received from a customer whose account was written off as uncollectible on March 31st. Okay, this is the recovery entry, right? When we recover from a write-off, there are two entries that we have to make. The first one is the reverse entry, and the second one is the regular collection entry. So for the reverse entry, it is exactly how it sounds. You're just going to reverse the account's position. Why are you doing this? Because you want to cancel the previous account. So if you invert the position, you're going to be canceling, right? Because if you debit something and then you credit something after with the same value, you end up reversing and canceling that account. And here, I'm just gonna wait for the values now because I want to tell you something first. After we have this account, what are we going to do? We're going to record the regular collection entry, which is what? Cash, right? Because we're going to be collecting this amount in cash, and we're going to have accounts receivable at the bottom. For the values, of course, is going to be 1,000. But the only reason why we have 1,000 here, it is not because it is 1,000 here. It is because here they said that they also got 1,000 back. If, for example, the value here was, let's say, 500, so the original amount that they owed me was 1,000, but I only recovered 500. I was only able to get 500 from this amount. The amount that you cancel cannot be 1,000, right? Because you cannot cancel this full entry because some of it you collected and some of it you did not collect it. So if it was 100, it would 500, excuse me, it would be 500, 500, 500, 500. In this case, we judged something uncollectible first, and then after we were able to receive the full amount, and this is why here it is 1,000 on all entries. And the reason why we're making these entries here is because the original exercise was to post to the allowance account, right? And what does that mean? That means that we have to make another allowance for doubtful accounts, the account. Can I use the old one? This one here on the top that we just did it, right? This one. I don't recommend it because you might get confused and you need this one for letter A, right? So I just recommended you to make another one. Okay. In our case, remember that after we calculate the bad debt expense here, this is the ending balance, right? So what we want to do is we want to have some dots here to signalize that something was here before. In our case, we had this, right? Just so we don't need to repeat it. So we can put some dots and just repeat the ending balance that we had previously. In this case was 38,610. Okay, now let's take a look at the entries that we have related to allowance of doubtful accounts. The first one that we have here is a debit of 1,000. So debit is on the left side. So oops, it's not here. Should be on the bottom. Is a debit of 1,000 like this. what is the next entry that has allowance for doubtful accounts here, right? A credit of 1,000. Do we have anything else? We do not. And here, the value is exactly the same, isn't it? Because if we subtract 1,000 and add 1,000, of course, we're going to end up with the same thing. So in this case, there is no effect. And that's because we wrote something off and then we cancel it, right? Okay. And then let's see letter C. Journalize the adjusting entry for bad debts on December 31st, 2021, assuming that the unadjusted balance in allowance for doubtful accounts is a debit of 800 and the aging schedule indicates that total estimated bad debts will be 31,600. Well, letter C is asking us to do the exact same as we did in letter A, right? Because remember, adjusting entry for bad debts, adjusting entry for bad debts. And then here, we had a credit of 12,000. In this case, we have a debit of 800,000, and that total estimated bad debts is also different here from here. Okay, so in letter C, we're basically just going to do what we did in letter A, but the numbers are going to be different. So yes, one more time, we're going to make a T account for allowance for doubtful accounts. And over here, we had an original beginning balance of a debit of 800, okay? A debit of 800, that means that we have to put the 800 here, right? Even though here it doesn't say that it's going to be a negative, this is the debit side. So we have to put the 800 here. And what was the total estimated bad debts, which means what is the total final value at the bottom? It is 31,600. Here, be careful. Even though they didn't say, oh, it is a debit credit or it is a debit balance or a credit balance, if it doesn't say anything, that means that it is a positive balance. So this 31,600,000 has to be on the credit side because the increases, the positive numbers in this allowance for doubtful accounts are always in this side, and this is why this one is over here. Well, what is the logic here? Which number do I have to add or subtract here or here in order for this 800 to become 31,600? Well, we have to add something, right? So since this 800 is on the left side, it is a negative. So minus 800 plus x, it is 31,600. Solving for x, we're going to add because we switched the sides. And what do we have? We have 32,400. This is our bad debts amount. And I believe they asked us to journalize the entry for December 31st of 2021. So here we're going to have December 31st of 2021. And we're going to have the same entry that we had before, the entry for bad debts expense. What is that? Bad debts expense goes up and allowance for doubtful accounts also goes up, right? And we're just going to have this value that we just figured out.